Welcome to the Moms I Know with Sheila Walsh-Denton and Maria Anderson-Farner. Two moms on a mission to reclaim childhood and take you from surviving to thriving on your parenting journey. The Moms I Know is your go-to source for motivation, inspiration, and resources, and real conversation about motherhood and parenting with intention. Thank you for being a part of our community. We hope you enjoyed this episode.
Learning is not the product of teaching. Learning is the product of the activity of learners. John Holt.
Hi, this is Maria.
And this is Sheila.
Welcome to the Moms I Know.
All right. So, Maria and I have been talking, we talk a lot about, as you know, education, homeschooling, what's going on. And we like to try to keep things current. And so last night there came across CDC guidelines for reopening schools. So I'm going to read those to you. And then Maria and I want to have a discussion about it and just what we think about this, both as educators, as homeschool educators, as well as mamas and grandma. So here we go. New CDC guidelines for reopening schools. Now, these are recommendations that are coming from the CDC, and these recommendations are not, they're not total like rules for each state. Each state, it's up to each state to interpret this as they choose. However, these are their recommendations. And as we know, I don't want to go into too much, but the CDC, what their role is as well. I don't want it to go into a conversation about vaccines, CDC, them saying this is information. And because it is kind of mainstream, that's why we're tackling this right now. Does that sound fair, Maria?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Wear masks over the age of 2. No sharing of any items or supplies, all belonging in individual cubbies or labeled containers. No sharing of electronic devices, toys, games, learning aids. Desks 6 feet apart, all facing the same way. Distance on school buses, 1 child per seat, skip rows. Install sneeze guards and partitions wherever they cannot space 6 feet apart. One-way routes and hallways, tape on sidewalks and walls to assure kids stay 6 feet apart. No communal shared places, which means cafeterias and playgrounds. Physical barriers or screens between sinks and bathrooms. Only prepackaged boxes or bags of food instead of cafeteria food. Kids eat in the classroom. No field trips, assemblies, or external organizations in schools. Limit volunteers and visitors. Some children stay with same staff all day. No switching groups or teachers. Stagger arrival and departure times for students to limit exposure to crowds of kids. If possible, daily health and temperature checks. And several rules about cleaning and disinfecting throughout the day and hand washing frequently.
Wow. I saw those this morning, and it really took me back because I was looking at this from so many different perspectives as a mother, as a teacher, and now as a grandmother of little ones. And just, this understanding of, okay, we are in a global pandemic. We need to look at what we need to look at to keep ourselves and our families safe. However, this it's mind-boggling. The reality of trying to have especially small children abide by these guidelines. I mean, for anyone who has worked with a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, I mean, keeping a mask on, just the very first one, children over the age of 2 will wear a mask. I don't know many even 3 or 4-year-olds who would literally be able to keep that on, much less is that a wise thing to be doing. I mean, this is going to expose so many of our deep feelings around this, but whatever the feelings are around each of these, just the practicality of implementing something like this seems so impossible.
Yeah, there are so many layers of it. The emotional health and well-being. Thinking of people wearing their masks, the smiles, the facial expression, the verbal cues, everything that how we communicate, especially for the littles, and how they, that's learning, that's socialization, and so we, at all ages, we're not talking about the homeschoolers, not that socialization question. We'll come to that another time. But really, it is. I really think the emotional health of our children will be greatly affected. Another one that comes up is financial. When you talk about buses, for example, that each child is on one row, about no volunteers. There's so many things that will directly affect our children learning and their ability to, why do we homeschool, Maria? To foster a lifelong love of learning. We know not every student gets that in the classroom, but a lot of kids do. And so I feel like putting this onto the classroom is going to be one more thing to push them out, to make learning hard. It does not sound fun. A lot of children go to school because of PE. It's part of it. They go to school because of the social, because of the playground. And if we take that away from them, I just don't see it being beneficial. And when I brought up this topic with you this morning, you said, is this how they're going to dismantle American education? And I'd like you to, let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, yes, I will talk about that, but I also want to go back to this concept of, as a teacher, we do what works for every child, and every child learns differently. And this type of paradigm will limit children's ability to process information in the way that works best for them. And so, and I'm also thinking of how it's going to raise anxiety in children as well. I'm thinking of children up to the age of even 10, 11, 12 that don't have the processing capability to understand exactly why this is happening and why they have to do things this way. And so, we know that when children's fears come up, what's called the affective filter goes up. We kind of shut down our ability to learn new things when we are in a heightened sense of anxiety. And so the very act of protecting our children from this unseen virus is going to raise that anxiety, which then prohibits them from learning. So it's just a catch-22 here. And I know that, educators are going to be trying the very best they can to make the schools a place of true learning. And yet with these types of recommendations, I just don't see how this could go. And so then this whole idea of, we've seen a real assault on our public school system over the past 3.5 years anyhow, and well, longer than that. And just the inequity in funding, the whole model of public education and the way in which schools get their resources. We've seen those inequities across the board throughout the United States and even around the world. And so now when we're looking at these increased, you brought up that financial piece as well. So how can we make something that is unsustainable already even more unsustainable down the road with these kinds of regulations? I also just saw something this morning that posted the salaries of most of the top education, the superintendents, the administrators, and they're significantly higher than teachers' salaries. And, I know that so many teachers are providing their own resources in the classrooms. The libraries are struggling to have, materials in them, teachers providing their own pencils and paper for kids. And yet, these higher administrators making these huge amounts of money. So the inequity within the system. So, now, like you said, whether it's the classroom, whether it's the bathrooms, whether it's the cleaning, again, we can bring up the whole idea, if we're disinfecting everything, how does that affect our immune systems? How does that affect the gut biome? So, like every single one of those recommendations, we could look at and analyze and say, how is this going to work? And I can imagine the staff of the school that, we were involved with right now, grappling with. I've talked with several of the teachers already just about how they were doing the distance learning for their students. And, it's really, really difficult now trying to add on all of these things, taking away outdoor education for the children, no recess. eating lunches at their little cubicles. Children need to move. They need to have all sorts of different modalities. They can't share toys. I mean, I'm trying to imagine a preschool where children can't share toys. So it's an unbelievable situation we find ourselves in. And yet, are we looking at this in completely wrong ways? And so also, we've been advocating for homeschooling. And so now all of these parents who have been struggling with teaching their children at home who hadn't already thought about homeschooling, now are going to be having to grapple with, can I send my child back to a school where this is going to be the reality? So I think that, again, we're here to support any of you who are considering schooling your children at home, and we can really help you look at that it's not just recreating the classroom at home. So many different ways of looking at education, and yet I also feel for those families that are not going to be able to keep their children home, and how do they adapt to this new paradigm?
Yeah. It's how do we adapt to this new paradigm? And you said the anxiety of the children, and I'm thinking the anxiety of the teachers, the anxiety of the parents. And I'll be honest, a lot of that I say parents, but I'm saying moms. This is why we're the moms I know. We've seen throughout these last few months that silent, I don't say workload, that silent pressure falls on mom. And, what are we going to do? I'm tongue-tied. Last night when I saw this, I asked my daughter, who's going to be a sixth grader, who came from homeschooling into school, developed community, loves it. And I said, what do you think about this? And she, throughout this whole thing, she's been pretty resilient, but she got sad. She said, what do you mean I won't be able to go back? And I said, well, you can't, we're going to talk about it as a conversation, because those guidelines, although that's what the CDC says, her school, it's a smaller school, it might look a little different. So I want to definitely get on for me to talk to my children's school and see what is the plan so I can make a more educated decision. So right now I'm in that stage of gathering information. So if you are unsure, I'd say this is your chance to gather information to see what school would look like. Another thing that really affects me that you touched on, Maria, is our microbiome. I'm a certified nutritionist, and with that background, it's all about the microbiome and how it affects all of our health. And that basically means our bacteria, right? We have 3.5 to 4.5 pounds of bacteria, and it's a balance of the good and bad bacteria. Well, right now what's going on is that we are over sanitizing everything. And if that's what they're doing at school, then they are killing the good bacteria as well when they're killing all bacteria, right? If everything is Clorox wiped and disinfected and everything, that is not beneficial. And I think we'll have a whole host of other issues, because it's all over the place. So I just think that what I envision, when say this was to happen, what I envision is outdoor schools, apart, but having little pods of outdoor schools. And then you have, parent teachers taking little pods and sharing their passion. And, Maria, that's kind of what we did when we homeschooled. It's parents signed up and said, this is what I'm passionate about. And they were able to teach that. And so that way it's a co-op of sorts. And so for us, because in our local area, a lot of the online charters I heard and I'm an online charter school teacher, and our school has a waiting list. I cannot even get my own daughter at my own charter school because the waiting list has gone past, but is doing with a PSA, a private school affidavit, and setting up my own private school to homeschool.
Well, the quote at the beginning is talking about education, in a community of learners. And so, we're going to have to look at this differently. And we don't want to be alarmist. I mean, here we are, recording on this morning when these guidelines have just come out, these recommendations. And so I think what really needs to happen here is parents need to not just do their research, but really weigh in on this and talk to their schools and their school boards and get curious and learn more about, everything that we've been talking about the sanitizing, about, what is true health? How do we boost our immune systems? Looking at alternative healthcare, looking at, different ways of educating our children. So this is our time to really empower ourselves as parents, as, the moms that we know and that we're talking with, and saying, you can take charge of your family's life, however that looks. And then if you are going to partner with an educational system, whether it's a homeschool program, a charter program, a public school, a private school, to be advocates for your child. And also, we've seen the numbers of children with learning differences, with autoimmune types of things, with different health challenges going up as well. I mean, just in the 30 years that I was in education, I saw a huge rise in the number of children who were dealing with different types of health challenges. And so, those children, we're going to be needing to look at those very carefully in terms of sending them back to school. And so I just know that this is a time of deep introspection for every single family, for every single parent out there, to look at, how does my child learn? What are my child's needs? What are our family's needs? And this is what we've been talking about with this whole concept of family school. And so when we look at the needs of every single person in the family, and then, for those people who are also in the education field, how this is going to impact. So it's just a time of deep upheaval, as well as challenges, concerns, but introspection. And so I think that we are really learning so much. There's also so much misinformation out there, and we don't want to be spreading any misinformation. We want you to be tackling these things on your own. Take what we're saying and then do your own research and look at these things and dig deeper and look at both sides. And, that's another thing that we've been really looking at right now, is this polarization. And it's not an either or, it's not this and that. There's so many nuances to all of this. And I find myself all over the map these days in terms of my own values and my beliefs, which I think is a really good thing. I think we need to question the current paradigm. We need to question everything. We need to teach our children to be thinking for themselves and challenging themselves. So I think, we're pretty passionate about this. And so we want to help people make decisions that work for their families.
Exactly. And I just want to reiterate is that we are not trying to sway you any one way. We're not, we do not want to propagate, bad information. This just came down and we don't know how it's going to play out. We just wanted to be on top of this because in my mom map group, I've been getting questions about the anxiety of kind of hearing little bits and pieces of this. And then how is that really going to look? And I think the big takeaway that we want to just, remind you is that this is a time to get more information, to, if you are thinking about homeschooling, listen to our homeschool series podcast. We have 6 episodes on how to homeschool. Get our homeschool handbook. These are things that you can start thinking about this. Is it a possibility? I think hands down, homeschooling is going to grow. I do think people are going to do that because right now, if you make that decision, it's an easier route right now than to go into the unknown. And so that is a real feasible possibility. Another book, I read this book years ago, and I just wanted to give a plug because I think it might really be appropriate right now, but it's called Radical Homemakers by Shannon Hayes. And it's reclaiming, the tagline is reclaiming domesticity from a consumer culture and, kind of reimagining, but what basically that is talking about is a sustainable future where we vote with our dollars. And I know Maria and I, we talked about, we did a podcast episode on that as well. It's like, how many of you are still buying from Amazon? Jeff Bezos, right? He's poised to become the first trillionaire. That's not necessary. In my opinion. And so how can we support our local booksellers, our local, mom and pop shops? And so I just want to give a tip that what I do is I use Amazon as a search engine, and then I find the products that I want, and then I go directly to the source. And sometimes it costs a little bit more, sometimes not. But for me, it feels a lot better than supporting Amazon.
I love this concept of really reclaiming homemaking and the family life. And sure, this is going to continue to be difficult. I know many families that are struggling with this. I also have heard many, many families who are kind of loving this, loving the slowdown. And so a book that I would recommend is Simplicity Parenting by Kim John Payne. And this whole idea of simplifying our lives and slowing down the pace and really looking at the choices that we're making. We don't need so much stuff. We don't need to fill our time with so many activities. Our children don't need all of that. They've been way overstimulated. And so now this is a time to pull back. It's a time to really look at these choices. And so I think both of those recommendations can be very helpful for people at this time. And again, to just deepen the conversation and check out both of our websites as well, because we have a lot of resources there around, nutrition and alternatives and different ways and techniques that we can use with our families. And so we just invite you to take advantage of all that is there. And yes, today, I think we're both a little bit heated about all of this and what it could be coming, and maybe it will look completely different as it plays out over the next couple of months. And so we just want to help continue the dialogue and continue the questioning.
So keep doing what you're doing, mamas. You're doing a good job. And if you need support, you know where to find us, and take a look at our homeschool handbook, because it is a wealth of information. Have a good day.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us today for the Moms I Know. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. To get the show notes and resources mentioned in today's episode, visit themomsiknow.com. For information on Maria's programs, visit thefutureoffamily.com. And for information on Sheila's programs, visit purplebeetfamily.com. Don't forget to subscribe and rate us on iTunes, and follow us on Instagram at The Moms I Know Podcast. Until next time, have a joyful family journey.